Tauchnitz was the name of a family of German printers and publishers. They published English-language literature for distribution on the European continent outside Great Britain, including initial serial publications of novels by Charles Dickens. Though copyright protection did not exist between nations in the 19th century, Tauchnitz paid the authors for the works they published, and agreed to limit the sales of English-language books to the European continent, as authors like Dickens or Bulwer Lytton had separate arrangements for publication and sale in Great Britain. Carl Christoph Tauchnitz, Carl Christoph Treuert Tauchnitz, born at Grossbadai near Grimma, Saxony, established a printing business in Leipzig in 1796 and a publishing house in 1798. He specialized in the publication of dictionaries, Bibles, and stereotyped editions of the Greek and Roman classics. He was the first publisher to introduce stereotyping into Germany. The business was carried on by his son, Carl Christian Philipp Tauchnitz, until 1865, when the business was sold to O. Holtz. He left large sums to the city of Leipzig for philanthropic purposes. Founding of Bernhard Tauchnitz. Christian Bernhard, Freiherr von Tauchnitz, the founder of the firm of Bernhard Tauchnitz, was the nephew of the first mentioned. Christian's father died when he was young and his uncle played an important part in his development. His printing and publishing firm was started at Leipzig on February 1, 1837. Bernhard started the collection of British and American authors in 1841, a reprint series familiar to Anglophone travelers on the continent of Europe. These inexpensive paper-bound editions, a direct precursor to mass-market paperbacks, were begun in 1841, and eventually ran to over 5,000 volumes. In 1868 he began the collection of German authors, followed in 1886 by the students' Tauchnitz editions. Early copyright reformer. In the early 1900s, a journalist writing about the company suggested that the warning on the covers of Tauchnitz's English-language books, not to be introduced into England or into any British colony, might lead some to believe that the books were not legitimate. In fact, the books were authorized by the authors of the representatives for continental sale only. The authors were paid royalties even at a time when no copyright protection for English and American books existed in Germany. That was Baron Tauchnitz's policy from the foundation of his company. He wrote in his original prospectus, "Allow me to remark that I, as well as any other publisher in Germany, have at present the right to embark in such undertakings without any permission from the authors, and that my propositions arise solely from a wish, thereby to take the first step towards a literary relationship between England and Germany, and towards an extension of the rights of copyright, and to publish my editions in accordance with those rights." Quote, in 1841, when Tauchnitz started his English-language editions, there were no copyright treaties between England of the United States and continental countries. Although Tauchnitz's editions were authorized, they were not protected from copyright infringement, and he could offer none to the authors he paid. A few years later, various continental states formed copyright treaties with Britain, Prussia and Saxony in 1846, France in 1852, and successively nearly all European states. In these countries, the Tauchnitz authorized edition became the copyright edition. Finally, the Berne Convention of 1886 conferred copyright upon authors in its fullest form over the greater part of the developed world. Tauchnitz editions were the only authorized editions of works by American authors on the continent of Europe until 1891, when, by the copyright treaty with the United States of America, they too became copyright editions. honors bestowed. In 1860 he was ennobled with the title of Freiherr for his services to literature, and in 1877 was made a life member of the Saxon Upper Chamber. From 1866 to 1895 he was British Consul General for the Kingdom and Duchies of Saxony. Christian Karl Bernhard. Christian Bernhard was succeeded in the business by his son, Christian Karl Bernhard, 2nd Baron of Tauchnitz. Christian Karl received his education at the Federal School of Saxony St. Afra in Meissen, studied law at the universities of Berlin, Zurich and Leipzig, and was a doctor of jurisprudence, and had passed the state examination by the age of 21. He made a tour of Europe, stayed some time in England, and learned to speak and write English with barely a flaw. In 1866, he entered into partnership with his father at his firm, Catalogue. The two authors who first attracted Tauchnitz's attention were Dickens and Lytton, with the novels Pickwick Papers and Pelham, which appeared in 1841. 22 years later, in 1863, the 500th title of the series was published under the title 5 Centuries of the English Language and Literature. In 1869, an English-language edition of the New Testament, exhibiting the differences between the original Alexandrine, Sinaitic and Vatican manuscripts, was the 1000th title. It was dedicated by the Baron to my English and American authors, as a token of esteem for the living, and a tribute of remembrance to the dead. Quote, in 1881, the 2000th title of English Literature in the Reign of Victoria by Henry Morley was issued, in which facsimiles of the signatures of all the authors who had been published in the Tauchnitz series appeared. By 1901, 3,500 books had been published. It was not only a catalogue of English works. German and French works filled a large space, as well as the Greek and Latin classics, which had been a speciality of his uncle Karl. His German edition of the Bible was a scholarly work. It included contributions from important German scholars including Karl Gottfried Wilhelm Tyler, Seligman Beck, Franz Delitzsch, Konstantin von Tischendorf and Oskar von Gebhardt, together with the Bibliotheca Patrum, scientific works, books on jurisprudence, and dictionaries covering most of the world's major languages filled the catalogue as well. The publishers amassed a huge amount of correspondence from authors of the day, which amounted to an important who's who of the time. Letters of thanks and dedications from many authors were in the Tauchnitz archive. These included letters from Harrison Ainsworth, Wilkie Collins, Maria Susanna Cummins, Louisa M. Alcott, Marguerite Gardner, Baron Lytton, Dinah Craig, Thomas Carlyle, Charles Dickens, Benjamin Disraeli, Gladstone, Thomas Babington Macaulay, George Henry Lewis, George Eliot, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Washington Irving, Longfellow, Elizabeth Gaskell, Charles Lever, Thackeray, Charles Reade, Tennyson, Robert Browning, Gerald du Maurier, James Payn and Robert Louis Stevenson. The Todd Bowden Collection of Tauchnitz editions. The Todd Bowden Collection is an important collection of Tauchnitz editions in the British Library. It was acquired in 1992 with the aid of the German Kulturstiftung der Länder and the National Heritage Memorial Fund. The collection includes approximately 6,700 volumes, together with sale catalogues, leaflets, and other advertising material, and is one of the most important collections of Tauchnitz books outside Germany.